The most ruthless CEO in Chicago is drunk, crying, and daring a senior accountant to walk her home in the snow. And this Christmas night will either destroy both their careers or save them from the loneliness they've been hiding for years. If you want to know how a chance encounter in a dive bar on Christmas night turned into a scandal that shook the boardroom and forced two brilliant people to choose between power and love, stay with me until the end. And if this story reaches you, hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this journey travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Ethan Hale had never intended to spend Christmas night anywhere near the office. The plan had been simple: Christmas Eve dinner with his sister's family in the suburbs, then back to his apartment to sleep off the wine and the noise and the inevitable questions about why he was still single at 34. But plans, as he'd learned during 15 years of corporate accounting, rarely survived contact with reality. The call came at 9:30 on Christmas night, just as he was settling into his couch with leftover pie and a basketball game he didn't care about. His assistant manager, panicked and apologetic, explained that the quarterly reconciliation files, the ones needed first thing the day after Christmas for the emergency audit, were sitting on Ethan's desk instead of uploaded to the secure server where they belonged. So here he was, 2 hours later, walking out of the silent Meridian Financial Tower with a laptop bag over his shoulder and snow crunching under his shoes. Michigan Avenue looked like a movie set after everyone had gone home. Holiday lights still glowed in shop windows, but the streets were nearly empty. Even the ambitious workaholics had taken Christmas night off. Ethan pulled his coat tighter and started the walk toward the L station. The wind off the lake had teeth tonight. He almost walked right past Murphy's Tavern. It was the kind of place that existed in the shadow of the gleaming corporate towers without ever quite belonging to that world. Dim lighting, scarred wooden booths, a jukebox that probably still played actual CDs. Ethan had been inside exactly twice in his 5 years at Meridian, both times for retirement parties of colleagues he barely knew. But the cold was vicious, and the next train wouldn't come for 20 minutes, and the warm glow spilling from Murphy's windows looked like mercy. He pushed through the door into a wall of beer-scented warmth. The place was nearly empty, a bartender wiping down glasses, an old man nursing something amber at the far end of the bar, and a woman in a black coat hunched over a tumbler of whiskey in the corner booth. Ethan ordered coffee, black, and was halfway through counting out bills when the woman in the corner laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was sharp and bitter, the kind of laugh that came when you'd run out of tears, but the hurt kept coming anyway. He knew that laugh. He'd heard it in conference rooms and shareholder meetings, though never quite so raw, never quite so stripped of armor. Ethan turned slowly, hoping he was wrong. He wasn't. Vivian Cross sat in the corner booth of a neighborhood dive bar, her $1,500 coat draped carelessly over the bench beside her, her usually immaculate dark hair falling loose around her face, and her eyes, those cold gray eyes that had stared down hostile takeovers and budget negotiations without blinking, red-rimmed and glassy with drink, and something that looked dangerously close to despair. The CEO of Meridian Financial, his boss's boss's boss, the woman whose quarterly addresses were legendary for their precision and ruthlessness. The Ice Queen of Michigan Avenue, Forbes had called her in a profile last year. Drunk, alone, on Christmas night. Ethan's first instinct was to leave. Immediately. Whatever breakdown was happening in that booth, it was so far above his pay grade that witnessing it felt like trespassing. He could walk out, catch his train, and pretend he'd never seen the most powerful woman in Chicago crying into cheap whiskey. But he didn't move. Something in the set of her shoulders, the way she was curved in on herself like she was trying to take up less space in the world, kept him frozen beside the bar. "You gonna drink that coffee or just hold it?" the bartender asked. Ethan blinked. "Right. Sorry." He moved toward an empty booth on the opposite side of the bar, deliberately choosing a seat that kept his back to Vivian Cross. Not his business, not his problem. She was a grown woman who could handle her own disasters. He made it 3 sips into his coffee before she spoke. "Ethan Hale." Her voice cut through the quiet bar like a blade, slightly slurred but still carrying that unmistakable authority. "Senior accountant, audit division. You won the Loss and Efficiency Award 2 years ago. Your quarterly reports are the only ones I don't have to correct." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, then turned. Miss Cross? Vivian. She lifted her glass in a mocking toast. Titles don't mean much at 11:30 on Christmas night in a dive bar, do they? He should agree, make small talk, finish his coffee, and leave. Instead, he found himself standing, walking over to her booth, and asking the question he already knew he'd regret. Are you all right? Vivian laughed again, that same bitter sound. Do I look all right, Ethan Hale? No, ma'am. Good. At least one person in this city is still honest. She gestured to the bench across from her. Sit. Unless you're afraid being seen with a drunk CEO will damage your sterling reputation. No one's here to see anything. But he sat anyway, setting his coffee on the table between them like a neutral barrier. Vivian studied him with eyes that were unfocused but still sharp enough to be unnerving. You're wondering what I'm doing here. It's not my business. That's the correct corporate answer, but you're curious. Everyone's always curious about me. She drained the rest of her whiskey and signaled the bartender for another. Do you know what I did today, Ethan? I assume you had Christmas plans. I worked. She laughed. I worked until 6, then I went back to my apartment. Do you know where I live? No, ma'am. Penthouse, Lakeshore Drive, 3,000 square feet, floor-to-ceiling windows, $17 million. She accepted the fresh whiskey from the bartender with a nod. I walked into that $17 million apartment, and do you know what I heard? Ethan shook his head. Nothing. Vivian's voice dropped to something quieter, more dangerous. Absolutely nothing. No music, no voices, no life. Just my footsteps echoing off imported marble. She took a long drink. So I left. Got in a cab. Told him to drive until I said stop. Ended up here. She gestured around the shabby bar. And it's the first place I've felt human in months. Why are you telling me this? Because you're here. Because you haven't run away yet. Because I'm drunk enough to be honest and sober enough to know I'll regret it tomorrow. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. Do you have family, Ethan? A sister, 2 nephews. Did you see them today? Yeah, dinner at her place in Naperville. Was it loud? The question caught him off guard. Yeah, the boys are 7 and 9. Everything's loud. Were there arguments, chaos, burnt cookies? Uncle Ethan, watch this. Uncle Ethan, help me with this? All of the above. Vivian smiled, but it was the saddest smile Ethan had ever seen. I would pay everything I have for one loud, chaotic, burnt cookie Christmas. Instead, I have $17 million of silence. She raised her glass. Merry Christmas to me. Ethan didn't know what to say. This wasn't the Vivian Cross he knew from quarterly meetings. The woman who could dismantle a failing department with 3 sentences, who negotiated billion-dollar mergers without breaking a sweat, who wore power like other people wore jewelry. This was someone else entirely. Someone lost. I should go, he said quietly, and I think you should too. Let me call you a car. I don't want a car, I want... Vivian trailed off, staring into her whiskey like it might hold answers. I don't know what I want. That's the problem. She looked up suddenly, eyes focusing on him with unexpected intensity. Walk me home. What? Walk me home. Through the snow, like a normal person who had too much to drink and needs help getting back safely. She stood, swaying slightly, then steadied herself against the table. Unless you're too afraid of the optics, CEO and senior accountant spotted together on Christmas night, the scandal. That's not... Then walk me home, Ethan Hale. Consider it your good deed for the day. She was already pulling on her coat, already heading for the door with determined if slightly unsteady steps. Ethan threw money on the table and followed, catching up to her on the sidewalk as the cold hit them both like a wall. I'm on Lake Shore, Vivian said, starting to walk. It's not far. It was at least a mile, and she was wearing heels, expensive heels that had no business navigating snow-covered sidewalks. This is a bad idea, Ethan said, falling into step beside her. All my best decisions are bad ideas. That's how I built an empire. She stumbled slightly, and his hand shot out to steady her elbow. She didn't pull away. You didn't have to follow me. You're drunk and it's below freezing. Of course I followed you. Noble Ethan, I bet you're the kind of man who holds doors and walks on the outside of the sidewalk. My mother raised me right. Where is she now? Your mother? She passed 8 years ago. Vivian's steps faltered. I'm sorry. That was thoughtless. It's okay. You didn't know. They walked in silence for a block, the snow falling heavier now, coating the empty streets in fresh white. The loop at midnight on Christmas felt like walking through a snow globe, beautiful and isolated and somehow unreal. My mother's alive, Vivian said suddenly. Phoenix, Scottsdale, actually, gated community. She sends a card every year, never calls, never visits. She tells her friends her daughter is very successful and very busy. We haven't spoken in 3 years. I'm sorry. Don't be. She made her choice. I made mine. Vivian's heel caught on an icy patch and she grabbed Ethan's arm, holding on this time. I chose the company, the power, the corner office. I chose success over everything else, and I won. Look at me. I won everything. The bitterness in her voice could have stripped paint. They turned onto Lakeshore Drive, the dark water of Lake Michigan stretching out beside them, the Gold Coast towers rising ahead. Vivian's building was obvious even from a distance, sleek, modern, obscenely expensive. You know what the worst part is? Vivian asked, her voice quieter now. I'm good at what I do, really good. I saved Meridian from bankruptcy. I turned it into one of the most profitable financial firms in the Midwest. I'm brilliant at corporate strategy and terrible at being human. You're being human right now. I'm being drunk. There's a difference. She stopped walking suddenly, turning to face him on the empty sidewalk, snow caught in her dark hair, melting on her flushed cheeks. Why did you really come with me, Ethan? And don't say it's because you're a gentleman. Nobody's that good. He could have lied, should have lied. Instead, he told the truth. Because I know what it's like to be alone on Christmas, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Vivian stared at him, something shifting behind her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. You're alone, too. Sometimes. Yeah. But you have your sister, your nephews. I do, and I'm grateful for them. But at the end of the night, I still go home to an empty apartment. I still wake up to silence. I'm just better at pretending it doesn't bother me. Why are you alone? Someone like you, decent, stable, employed. You should be married with kids by now. Ethan shrugged. I was engaged once, 5 years ago. She wanted someone who'd leave the office at 5, who'd prioritize vacations over promotions, who'd be present instead of ambitious. Turns out I wanted the career more than I wanted her. And you regret it? Sometimes. Other times I think we both dodged a bullet. We wanted different things. There's no compromise in that. Vivian nodded slowly. I was married. Did you know that? No. It wasn't in any of the profiles he'd read, any of the business articles. 12 years ago, lasted 18 months. He was an attorney, brilliant, handsome, completely unable to handle being married to someone more successful than him. When I made partner before he did, he started picking fights. When I became CEO, he filed for divorce. She started walking again. He married his paralegal 6 months later. They have 3 kids now, and I saw the Christmas card on his Facebook page. I'm sorry. I'm not. He would have held me back. They all would have. She stumbled again, and this time Ethan kept his arm around her waist, steadying her. She leaned into him without protest. That's what they don't tell you about success, Ethan. Every achievement costs something. Every promotion is a trade. You climb high enough, and eventually you realize you're up there alone. They reached her building, all glass and steel and modern luxury. The doorman, bless him, didn't even blink at the sight of his resident being half-carried by a stranger at midnight. Miss Cross, good evening. Evening, Marcus. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, ma'am, sir. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent. Vivian leaned against the wall, eyes closed, breathing carefully. Ethan stood on the opposite side, hands in his pockets, trying not to think about how badly this could go wrong. He was alone in an elevator with his drunk CEO, heading to her apartment at midnight. If anyone found out, the elevator opened directly into her apartment, and Ethan's thoughts scattered. He'd expected luxury. What he got was art installation meets museum meets mausoleum. Everything was white and chrome and glass. The furniture looked like it had never been sat on. The kitchen gleamed like it had never been cooked in. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed the lake and the city lights, but somehow the view made the space feel even emptier. "Welcome to the Fortress of Solitude," Vivian said, kicking off her heels and padding barefoot across marble floors. $17 million, and it feels like a hotel lobby. She was right. It was beautiful and impressive and completely devoid of life. No books on the shelves, no photos on the walls, no mess, no warmth, no evidence that a human being actually lived here. "You should drink some water," Ethan said, "and take some aspirin. You're going to feel terrible tomorrow." "I feel terrible now. Tomorrow will just make it official." But she went to the kitchen anyway, opening cabinets until she found glasses and a bottle of aspirin. "You don't have to stay. I'm home safe. Your good deed is complete." "I'll stay until you drink the water." She filled a glass, drained it, then filled it again. "Satisfied?" "Getting there," Vivian laughed, and this time it sounded almost genuine. "You're stubborn. I didn't notice that before. You've never spoken to me before, not directly. I've noticed you, though. You're the one who fixed the Carrington audit without being asked, who stays late when everyone else goes home, who never makes excuses when something goes wrong." She set the glass down. "I notice competence, Ethan. It's rare enough to be remarkable." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Competent people threaten the comfortable mediocrity everyone else is trying to preserve. You'll make enemies." "Speaking from experience?" "Always." She moved toward him, steady on her feet now, though her eyes were still glassy. "You know what's funny? We're the same, you and me. Married to the job, choosing ambition over connection, building careers instead of lives." She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could smell whiskey and expensive perfume. "The difference is, you still have time to choose differently. I'm 42. This is what I built. This is what I get. It doesn't have to be. Doesn't it?" She reached up, her fingers brushing his collar, straightening it absently. "What would you have me do, Ethan? Quit? Walk away from everything I built? Become someone else at 42? "I'd have you consider that maybe success doesn't have to mean solitude." Her hand stilled. They were standing too close now, close enough that he could see the flecks of blue in her gray eyes, close enough to see the crack in her carefully maintained armor. "You should go," Vivian whispered, but she didn't step back. "Yeah, I should." Neither of them moved. "If you stay," she said quietly, "if you come upstairs with me right now, we both know what happens. And tomorrow, everything gets complicated. Power dynamics, corporate ethics, regret." "I know. So why are you still here?" Ethan stepped back, putting safe distance between them. "Because someone should make sure you're actually okay before they leave. And because complicated is better than taking advantage of someone who's vulnerable." Something shifted in Vivian's expression, surprise giving way to something softer, something that looked almost like relief. "You're serious?" "Yeah." "You're not going to kiss me. You're not going to stay. You're just going to—" "What? Tuck me in and leave?" "I'm going to make sure you're safe, then I'm going to go home. And tomorrow we'll both pretend this didn't happen." Vivian stared at him for a long moment, then laughed. A real laugh this time, startled and genuine. "You're either the most noble man in Chicago or the most oblivious." "Probably both." She walked past him to the couch, the pristine white couch that looked like it had never been used, and collapsed onto it with theatrical exhaustion. "Fine. Be noble. But I'm not going upstairs. The bed's too big and too cold, and I hate it. I'll sleep here." Ethan grabbed a throw blanket from a nearby chair and draped it over her. "Do you have coffee for tomorrow?" "Kitchen, top cabinet, probably expired. I'll make fresh. You'll thank me when you wake up." "Doubtful." He found the coffee, found the machine, all chrome and buttons and probably cost more than his car, and figured out how to brew a pot. While it dripped, he explored the kitchen until he found bread and butter and made toast, because drunk people needed food even when they didn't want it. When he returned to the living room with coffee and toast on a tray, Vivian was still awake, staring at the ceiling. "You're still here." "I made you breakfast for 3 a.m. She sat up, accepted the coffee, and took a careful sip. "This is ridiculous. You're ridiculous. Why are you being kind to me?" "Why is that ridiculous?" "Because I'm your CEO. Because I hold your career in my hands. Because kindness toward me should be strategic, not genuine. Ethan sat in the chair across from her. What if I told you I'm not being strategic? What if I'm just being human? Then I'd say you're wasting it on someone who forgot how to return the favor. I don't think you forgot. I think you buried it under ambition and survival and whatever it took to get where you are. But it's still there. He gestured to the coffee cup. You said Merry Christmas to your doorman. You remember my name and my award from 2 years ago. You notice when people are competent. That's not someone who's forgotten how to be human. That's someone who's lonely. Vivian's hands tightened on the coffee cup. You don't know me. You're right, I don't. But I know that look. I've seen it in the mirror. She was quiet for a long time, just drinking coffee and eating toast like it was the first meal she'd had in days. Maybe it was. What would you do? She asked finally. If you were me, if you'd built this life and realized too late that it wasn't enough, I'd stop pretending it was. Just like that? Just admit defeat? It's not defeat. It's honesty. Success doesn't mean anything if you're miserable. And you're miserable, Vivian. So are you. Yeah, but at least I'm honest about it. She laughed softly. Fair enough. She set down the coffee cup and looked at him, really looked, without the alcohol haze or the corporate mask. Thank you. For tonight. For not leaving. For not taking advantage. You don't have to thank me for basic decency. In my world, basic decency is rare enough to deserve thanks. Ethan stood checking his watch. Nearly 2 a.m. I should go. You need sleep, and I have a train to catch before they stop running entirely. Ethan? She stood too, the blanket falling away. Tomorrow, at the office. We really are going to pretend this didn't happen, right? If that's what you want. It's not about what I want. It's about what's smart, what's safe. Then that's what we'll do. He was halfway to the elevator when she spoke again. Or, he turned. Or what? Vivian crossed the space between them, barefoot and rumpled, and more real than she'd ever looked in any boardroom. Or maybe we don't pretend. Maybe we acknowledge that something happened tonight. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing we need to hide. Just two lonely people who found each other on Christmas and were honest for a few hours. That's dangerous. I built a career on dangerous decisions. This isn't business, Vivian. I know. That's what makes it terrifying. She stopped just in front of him, close but not touching. I don't know what this is. I don't know what happens next. But I know I don't want to pretend you don't exist. I don't want to go back to quarterly reports and polite nods in the hallway. What do you want? I want to know if loneliness is all I get to keep from tonight, or if there's something else, something more. Ethan's heart was pounding. This was dangerous. This was career suicide. This was coffee, he said. What? Have coffee with me. Tomorrow, somewhere neutral, somewhere public. Not as CEO and employee, just as two people who are tired of being alone. Vivian smiled, and it transformed her face. That's possibly the most dangerous thing you've said all night. Probably. But you asked what I want. That's it. Coffee. Conversation. No pretending. No pretending, she echoed. Then, moving faster than he expected, she leaned up and kissed him, brief and soft and tasting of whiskey and coffee. When she pulled back, her eyes were wide, like she'd surprised herself. Vivian, go, before I do something else reckless. She stepped back, wrapped her arms around herself. Coffee tomorrow. Text me where. I don't have your number. Yes, you do. I put it in your phone while you were making toast. Despite everything, Ethan laughed. Of course you did. I'm still a CEO. I'm allowed to be resourceful. But she was smiling, and it was genuine, and it made her look 10 years younger. The elevator doors closed between them, and Ethan rode down alone, his mind racing. He'd just agreed to have coffee with his CEO. He'd just been kissed by the most powerful woman in Chicago. He'd just stepped into something that could destroy his career or change his life, and he had no idea which one was coming. Outside, the snow was still falling, covering the city in quiet white. The streets were empty. The world felt suspended between one moment and the next. Ethan walked toward the L station, hands in his pockets, breath fogging in the cold air. Tomorrow, he'd have coffee with Vivian Cross. Tomorrow, everything would get complicated. But tonight, on Christmas night in Chicago, two lonely people had found each other in a dive bar and chosen honesty over pretending. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start building something real. The train carried him home through the silent city, and Ethan stared out the window at the snow-covered streets and thought about gray eyes and bitter laughter, and the way Vivian had looked when she smiled, like someone remembering how. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number that was already saved in his contacts as Vivian. Thank you for tonight. For all of it. I meant what I said. Coffee tomorrow? He typed back. Same place we met. Murphy's. Noon. It's a date. Or not a date. Or something in between. Something in between sounds about right. Good night, Ethan Hale. Good night, Vivian Cross. He pocketed his phone and leaned back against the seat, a smile tugging at his lips despite the danger, despite the risk, despite every logical reason to walk away. Maybe success didn't have to mean solitude. Maybe loneliness didn't have to be permanent. Maybe two people who'd chosen ambition over everything else could learn to choose differently. The train rushed through the snowy night, carrying Ethan toward home and tomorrow and whatever came next, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he was actually looking forward to finding out. The coffee at Murphy's the next day was terrible, but neither of them seemed to notice. Ethan arrived 10 minutes early, claiming the same booth where he'd found Vivian the night before. In daylight, the bar looked even shabbier, scuffed floors, faded paint, the kind of place that survived on proximity to the business district rather than ambition. But it was neutral ground, and right now, that mattered more than ambition. Vivian walked in at 12:03, and she looked nothing like the woman from last night. Gone was the rumpled coat and the desperate vulnerability. She wore tailored black pants, a charcoal sweater, minimal makeup, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked polished, but not corporate, put together, but not armored. She looked human. "You actually came," Ethan said, standing as she approached. "Did you think I wouldn't?" She slid into the booth across from him. "I thought there was a 50-50 chance you'd pretend last night never happened and have security escort me out of the building Monday morning." Vivian smiled faintly. "I considered it for about 30 seconds. Then I remembered I was the one who kissed you, so having you fired would be poor form." The waitress appeared, same woman from last night, though she gave no indication she recognized either of them. They ordered coffee, and Vivian requested a turkey sandwich she probably wouldn't eat. When they were alone again, silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable exactly, but heavy with everything they weren't saying. "How's your head?" Ethan asked finally. "Survived. Barely. Your coffee and toast helped." She traced a finger along the rim of her water glass. "I don't usually drink like that. In case you were wondering if this is a pattern." "I wasn't wondering." "Liar. Everyone wonders. The Ice Queen falls apart on Christmas. There must be a reason. Substance abuse, mental breakdown, secret scandal." She met his eyes. "It wasn't any of those. It was just loneliness. Pure, simple loneliness that finally got too heavy to carry." "I know the feeling." "Do you? Really?" She leaned forward slightly. "Because from where I sit, you have family, community, people who want you around for holidays. That's not the same as what I have." "You're right. It's not the same. But loneliness isn't a competition, Vivian. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. I go to my sister's house and play with my nephews and eat burnt cookies, and then I go home to silence. Different circumstances, same result." The coffee arrived, and Vivian wrapped both hands around the mug like she was trying to absorb its warmth. "Why did your engagement end?" "Really? Not the corporate safe answer you gave me last night." Ethan considered deflecting, then remembered they'd agreed on honesty. "Because I was building a career I thought I wanted, and ignoring a relationship I thought would wait. By the time I realized what I was losing, she'd already moved on. She met someone else, a teacher. They got married last year. He's home by 4 every day. They're expecting their first kid in March." "And you regret it?" "I regret not being honest with her sooner. I don't regret the choice itself. We would have made each other miserable. But I wish I'd admitted that before she wasted 3 years waiting for me to become someone I wasn't." Vivian nodded slowly. "My ex-husband told me I was incapable of love. During the divorce proceedings. His attorney asked him to describe our relationship, and he said I was incapable of emotional intimacy, that I chose power over connection every single time. That must have hurt. It did, because part of me worried he was right. She took a sip of coffee, grimaced at the taste. I've spent 15 years proving him wrong by not trying. Easier to be alone than to fail at being human. You're not failing right now. We're having coffee, Ethan. That's not exactly proof of emotional growth. You showed up. You're being honest. You're not hiding behind the CEO mask. That counts. Something shifted in her expression. A crack in the armor, brief but real. I almost didn't come. This morning, I woke up and thought about all the reasons this was a mistake. The scandal potential, the power dynamic, the fact that you work for me and this could destroy both our careers if anyone found out. What changed your mind? I looked around my apartment and realized I'd rather risk the scandal than spend another Sunday alone in $17 million of emptiness. She set down her coffee cup. That probably makes me selfish, using you as an escape from loneliness. What if I'm doing the same thing? Are you? Ethan thought about it, really thought about it. I don't know what this is. Yesterday morning, you were my CEO, someone I respected from a distance but never expected to actually know. Now, you're He trailed off, searching for the right words. A mess, Vivian supplied. Human, real, someone I actually want to know. That's possibly the worst romantic declaration I've ever heard. Good thing this isn't romance, then. It's just coffee between two lonely people who are tired of pretending. Vivian laughed, and it was genuine. Okay, so what do two lonely people who are tired of pretending do next? I guess we figure out if we like each other outside of Christmas night confessions and emotional breakdowns. And if we don't? Then we have more terrible coffee and call it a learning experience. Her sandwich arrived, and she picked at it absently, pulling apart the bread without eating. Tell me something real about yourself, something that's not on your employee file. Ethan leaned back in the booth. I wanted to be a musician, played guitar all through college, had a band, played dive bars, convinced myself we were going to make it. Then my mom got sick and I needed insurance and stability. Became an accountant instead. Haven't played in 8 years. Do you miss it? Every day. But I'm good at accounting. I'm reliable. I can pay my bills and help my sister when she needs it. That matters more than chasing dreams that probably wouldn't have worked out anyway. Vivian was quiet for a moment. I wanted to be a teacher. Elementary school, second grade specifically. I loved the idea of helping kids learn to read, to fall in love with stories and numbers and discovery. What happened? My mother told me teachers don't make money, that I was too smart to waste my potential on a noble profession, so I went to business school instead. Graduated top of my class. Became everything she wanted and nothing I dreamed about. She finally took a bite of her sandwich. Sometimes I wonder what kind of person I'd be if I'd chosen differently. Maybe you'd be just as lonely. Different circumstances, same result. Maybe. Or maybe I'd have a classroom full of kids who remembered me, instead of a company full of employees who fear me. They don't all fear you. Most do. You don't. That's why I noticed you. The confession hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither of them was ready to address. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from his sister. How was your night? You disappeared early. He typed back, long story, tell you later. Vivian watched him with those sharp gray eyes. Your sister checking on you? Yeah, she worries. That must be nice, having someone who worries. It is. Also annoying sometimes, but mostly nice. He pocketed his phone. What about you? Any siblings? Only child. My mother's perfect achievement. She had me late, after years of fertility treatments, raised me to be exceptional. When my father left when I was 12, she doubled down on success as survival. I learned early that love was conditional and achievement was currency. That's a lot for a kid to carry. I didn't know any different. I thought everyone's childhood was performance reviews and strategic planning sessions. Wasn't until college that I realized other families actually liked each other. She pushed her plate away. This is depressing. Let's talk about something else. Like what? Like what you do when you're not working, hobbies, interests, things that make you human outside of spreadsheets and audit reports. Ethan considered. I run. Train for marathons, it's meditative. Just me and the pavement and whatever podcast is keeping me company. Podcasts about what? True crime, mostly. History. Sometimes interviews with musicians or writers. Things that remind me there are people out there doing interesting things with their lives. While you audit their tax returns. Exactly. He smiled. What about you? What does the CEO of Meridian Financial do when she's not terrifying board members? I read. Voraciously. Everything from literary fiction to trashy romance. I probably have 5,000 books in my apartment. I didn't see any books last night. They're in my bedroom, behind closed doors where no one can judge my collection of bodice rippers and murder mysteries. She smiled faintly. I have an image to maintain. What else? I swim. There's a pool in my building. I go at 5 a.m. before anyone else is awake. It's the only time I feel completely alone without feeling lonely. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does. They talked for 2 hours. The coffee got cold and was refilled. Vivian's sandwich disappeared in small bites between conversations about books and running routes and the absurdity of corporate culture. Ethan learned that she spoke French fluently, that she'd lived in Paris for a year after business school, that she'd once walked across Spain on a solo pilgrimage, and it remained the best month of her life. She learned that he'd grown up in Michigan, that his father had been a factory worker who died young from a heart attack, that Ethan had put himself through college working 3 jobs because debt felt like failure. They discovered they both hated mushrooms and loved Thai food and had complicated relationships with success that looked simple from the outside. By the time they left Murphy's, the afternoon had turned to early evening. The holiday lights were coming on along Michigan Avenue, and the city looked magical in that brief window between day and night. They walked without destination, just moving through the cold air and the thinning crowds of post-Christmas shoppers. This is dangerous, Vivian said as they passed the Art Institute. Spending time together. Getting to know each other. I know. If anyone from Meridian sees us, then we're 2 colleagues who happen to run into each other during the holidays. Nothing scandalous about coffee. It feels scandalous. Ethan stopped walking, turned to face her. Does it feel wrong? Vivian met his eyes, and he saw conflict there, fear and hope warring for dominance. No, that's the problem. It feels right, and things that feel right for me usually end badly. What if they don't this time? Then I'll have no idea what to do with that. They started walking again, and somehow Vivian's hand found his. Not romantically exactly, more like an anchor, a lifeline between 2 people who'd spent too long drifting alone. I have a proposal, Ethan said as they reached the river. Completely inappropriate and possibly career-ending. I'm listening. It's the week between Christmas and New Year's. The office is basically empty, dead zone. What if we use that time to figure out if this is real or just holiday loneliness? Define this. Whatever's happening, this connection, this feeling that maybe loneliness isn't permanent. Vivian stopped walking, leaned against the railing overlooking the Chicago River. Below them, water reflected the city lights in fractured patterns. And how would we do that? Carefully, quietly. We spend time together, not as CEO and employee, just as 2 people getting to know each other. No pressure, no expectations, just honesty. And if it doesn't work out, then we go back to being professional colleagues who respect each other from a distance. And if it does work out, we deal with that when we get there. Vivian was quiet for a long time, watching the water. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm terrible at this. Relationships, vulnerability, letting people in. My track record is catastrophic. Mine's not much better. So we're 2 disasters hoping to make something functional? Sounds about right. She laughed, sharp and bitter. This is insane. Probably. We could both lose everything. We could? You're not selling this very well. Ethan moved beside her, close enough to feel her warmth in the cold air. I'm not selling anything. I'm just saying that maybe we both deserve a chance to be something other than lonely. Even if it's temporary. Even if it's complicated. Even if it scares us. Vivian turned to look at him, and in the reflected light from the river, her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears or might have been hope. You're either very brave or very stupid. My sister votes for stupid. Smart woman. But Vivian was smiling. Okay, 1 week. We see if this is real or just Christmas magic that evaporates with the new year. Ground rules? Discretion. Absolute discretion. No one can know. Not your sister, not my assistant, not anyone. Agreed. What else? Honesty. Painful, uncomfortable honesty. If this isn't working, we say so. No pretending. Done. Anything else? Vivian hesitated. If it gets complicated, if the power dynamic becomes a problem, if either of us feels uncomfortable, we stop. Immediately. No questions, no hurt feelings. Okay? I'm serious, Ethan. I won't risk your career for this. If it comes down to your job or whatever this is, I need you to promise you'll choose your job. I promise to tell you if that choice needs to be made. But I'm not promising which way I'll choose. That's not what I asked for. It's what you're getting. She stared at him, and he saw the moment she decided to let it go. Fine. Stubborn. You knew that already. They walked back toward her building through streets that had grown quieter as evening deepened. The cold had teeth now, but neither of them seemed to notice. At the entrance to her building, Vivian stopped. Would you like to come up? Just for dinner. I can't cook, but I can order excellent Thai food. I thought we were being discreet. Marcus has seen you twice now. Adding a third time won't change anything. Besides, he's paid very well to not notice things. Ethan knew he should say no, should go home, give them both space to think, maintain some semblance of professional distance. He said yes anyway. Her apartment looked different in evening light. Still minimalist, still cold, but somehow less oppressive. Vivian moved through the space with practiced efficiency, ordering dinner on her phone while Ethan gravitated toward the windows. The view was stunning. The lake stretched out dark and vast, dotted with lights from distant boats. The city glowed behind him, alive and indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in its towers. I forget sometimes, Vivian said, joining him at the window, how beautiful it is. I spend so much time working that I forget to actually look. That's sad. It is. Add it to the list of things I'm terrible at. Being present, appreciating moments, not destroying good things before they have a chance to grow. You haven't destroyed this yet. Give me time. The Thai food arrived 40 minutes later, and they ate sitting on her pristine white couch that had probably cost more than Ethan's car. Vivian ate like someone who'd forgotten what appetite felt like, picking at pad thai and green curry with mechanical precision. When did you last eat a real meal? Ethan asked. Define real. Sitting down, not at your desk, actually tasting the food. Vivian thought about it. I honestly can't remember. Weeks, maybe. I eat in my office, usually while reviewing reports. Food is just fuel. That's depressing. It's efficient. It's lonely. She set down her fork. Everything about my life is lonely, Ethan. You said it yourself last night. I built success and ended up with isolation. Food is just one more thing I do alone. You're not alone right now. No, I'm not. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. This feels surreal. You, here, eating Thai food on my couch like we're normal people having a normal evening. Maybe we are. We're not. I'm your CEO. You're risking your career by being here. There's nothing normal about this. Then let's pretend, for tonight, just two people who like each other's company sharing a meal. Vivian smiled faintly. You're relentlessly optimistic. It's annoying. You're relentlessly pessimistic. It's exhausting. And yet here we are. Here we are. They finished dinner with the kind of comfortable silence that usually took months to develop. When the food was gone, Vivian curled into the corner of the couch, and Ethan noticed for the first time how small she looked without her armor, how young and uncertain and nothing like the woman who commanded boardrooms. Tell me something you're afraid of, she said suddenly. Besides this? Us? Besides the obvious, Ethan considered. I'm afraid I'll wake up at 60 and realize I spent my entire life being responsible instead of alive, that I'll have a solid 401k and a paid-off mortgage and absolutely nothing worth remembering. That's specific. I watched my dad die at 53. He worked himself to death at a job he hated, providing for a family he barely saw. His funeral was on a Tuesday. Half his coworkers didn't even know he was sick. I'm terrified of becoming that, useful, reliable, and completely forgettable. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. You're not forgettable, Ethan. Neither are you, but we're both trying so hard to be successful that we might miss the part where we actually live. Is that what this is? Your attempt to actually live? Maybe. Is that what it is for you? She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapped her arms around them, the gesture so vulnerable it made Ethan's chest ache. I don't know what this is. I know I haven't felt this present, this awake, in years. I know that scares me more than any hostile takeover or budget crisis I've ever faced. I know I'm probably going to sabotage this because that's what I do. What if you don't? Then I'll have no idea who I am. My entire identity is built on control and success and keeping people at a distance. If I let you in, if I let this be real, I'm not sure what's left of me. Ethan moved closer, close enough that their knees touched. Maybe what's left is the person you were before you built all those walls. Maybe that's not a loss. Maybe it's a rediscovery. You sound like a self-help book. I know, sorry. But she was smiling, and she didn't pull away when he took her hand. They talked until midnight, about everything and nothing, about fears and failures and the small moments of grace that kept them moving forward. Vivian told him about the swimming pool at 5 a.m., about how the water made her feel weightless. Ethan told her about marathon training, about how running cleared his mind of spreadsheets and expectations. They discovered they'd both seen the same documentary about climate change and had the same anxiety about the future. They argued about books. She loved literary fiction. He preferred thrillers, but found common ground in their mutual appreciation for flawed characters trying to do better. When Ethan finally left, the city was quiet and the temperature had dropped below freezing. Vivian walked him to the elevator, still barefoot, still looking nothing like the CEO the world knew. Same time tomorrow? She asked. You're off work? I'm always off work this week. No one's in the office, no meetings, no emergencies. Just dead time I usually spend reading reports I've already reviewed 3 times. Then yes, same time tomorrow. She kissed him at the elevator doors, brief and soft and tasting of Thai basil and possibility. When she pulled back, her eyes were clear. Thank you. For today. For not running away. Thank you for taking the risk. The elevator descended and Ethan rode it alone, his mind full of gray eyes and unexpected vulnerability and the terrifying, thrilling possibility that maybe loneliness wasn't permanent after all. His phone buzzed before he reached the lobby. I'm glad you came up. I'm glad we're doing this. I'm terrified, but I'm glad. He typed back, Me too, on all counts. See you tomorrow? Absolutely. Outside, the cold hit him like a wall, but Ethan barely noticed. He walked to the L station with his hands in his pockets and something unfamiliar in his chest that might have been hope. Behind him, 17 floors up, Vivian Cross stood at her window and watched the city lights blur through unexpected tears. For the first time in years, her apartment didn't feel quite so empty. For the first time in memory, she was looking forward to tomorrow. She picked up her phone and did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She called her assistant and told her to block the entire week. No meetings, no calls, no interruptions. Is everything all right, Ms. Cross? Her assistant asked, concern evident in her voice. Everything's fine, Sarah. I just need the time. Of course. Shall I say you're traveling? Just say I'm unavailable. That's all anyone needs to know. When she hung up, Vivian looked around her pristine apartment and made a decision. She walked to her bedroom, opened the closet, and started pulling out boxes of books she'd been hiding for years. Romance novels and mysteries and literary fiction that had nothing to do with business or success or the image she maintained. She carried them to the living room and started arranging them on the empty shelves, chaotic and colorful and completely inappropriate for a CEO's carefully curated space. By 2 a.m., her shelves were full of stories, and her apartment looked lived in for the first time since she'd bought it. Vivian stood back, surveyed the mess, and smiled. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe what was left when you stopped performing wasn't emptiness. Maybe it was the person you'd been all along, just waiting for permission to exist. She went to bed that night surrounded by books instead of silence, and for once, sleep came easy. The week between Christmas and New Year's unfolded like a secret, quiet, deliberate, and entirely theirs. They met every day, alternating between Vivian's apartment and neutral spaces where no one from Meridian would think to look. Coffee shops in neighborhoods far from the Loop, a small Italian restaurant in Little Italy where the owner didn't recognize power when it walked through his door. The Art Institute on a Tuesday afternoon when the galleries were nearly empty and they could stand in front of impressionist paintings without anyone watching. Ethan learned that Vivian hummed while she read, unconscious and slightly off-key. That she took her coffee black in the office but loaded it with cream and sugar when no one was watching. That she had a scar on her left wrist from a skiing accident in college, and still flinched when she saw fresh snow on mountain peaks. Vivian learned that Ethan talked to himself while he ran, carrying on full conversations about work problems or philosophical questions that had no answers. That he'd memorized the guitar solo from every Led Zeppelin song but couldn't carry a tune to save his life. That he sent his sister money every month without telling her, disguising it as birthday gifts or Christmas bonuses, even when neither occasion was anywhere near. On the third day, Vivian showed up at Ethan's apartment unannounced, holding 2 coffees and a bag of bagels like an offering. "Is this okay?" she asked when he opened the door, still in running clothes and sweating from a morning 5 miles. "I should have texted first. I can go." "It's okay. Come in." He stepped aside, suddenly aware that his studio apartment was about 800 square feet of organized chaos compared to her pristine penthouse. Books stacked on every surface, running shoes by the door, a guitar case leaning against the wall collecting dust. Vivian walked in slowly, taking it all in. "This is where you live." "Yeah, it's not $17 million of marble, but it's home." "It looks like someone actually lives here." "That's better than marble." She set the coffee and bagels on his small kitchen table, then gravitated toward the guitar case. "Is this the one? From your college band days?" "Yeah, I haven't opened it in years." "Why not?" Ethan shrugged, grabbing a towel to wipe the sweat from his face. "Because playing it reminds me of what I gave up. Easier to leave it closed." "That's sad." "It's practical." Vivian turned to face him, and there was challenge in her eyes. "Play something for me." "What?" "No, I haven't touched it in 8 years. You said, play something anyway." "Vivian, please." The word was soft, stripped of command. "I showed you my romance novel collection. You can play me one song." He wanted to refuse, should have refused. Instead, he found himself opening the case, pulling out the old acoustic guitar that had once been his most prized possession. The strings were dusty but still in tune. He'd maintained it even when he wasn't playing it, unable to let it fall into complete disrepair. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, settled the guitar in his lap, and played the first thing that came to mind. An old blues progression, simple and sad. The kind of thing he used to play at 2 a.m. when the bars were closing and the crowd had thinned to diehards and insomniacs. His fingers remembered even when his mind had forgotten. The muscle memory was still there, waiting. When he finished, Vivian was sitting in his desk chair, coffee forgotten, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. "You're good," she said quietly. "Really good." "I was okay. Not good enough to make a living at it." "You don't know that. You never tried." "I tried for 4 years, played every dive bar in Michigan, got nowhere. It was time to be realistic. Or maybe it was time to be safe." She stood, crossed to where he sat. "Maybe safe and realistic aren't the same thing." Says the woman who's been choosing safe for 15 years. Exactly. I know what it costs." She touched the guitar, ran her fingers along the worn wood. "I built a fortress and called it success. You locked away your dreams and called it responsibility. We're the same, Ethan, both hiding from the things that might make us happy because happiness feels too risky." "Is that what this is? Us taking risks?" "I think so. I think we're both terrified and doing it anyway." He set the guitar aside, stood to face her. They were close now, close enough that he could see the pulse at her throat, count the faint lines at the corners of her eyes that appeared when she smiled. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Right now, in this moment, are you happy?" Vivian considered the question seriously, like she was analyzing a quarterly report. "I'm not miserable. That's something. I'm present. I'm interested. I'm feeling things I haven't let myself feel in years. Is that happiness? I don't know, but it's better than what I had before. That's a low bar. It's my bar. All I've got. Ethan reached up, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't pull away. I'm happy, just so you know. Right now, with you here in my mess of an apartment, I'm actually happy. Good. Someone should be. You could be too, if you let yourself. She kissed him then, and it was different from the brief, tentative kisses they'd shared before. This was deliberate, certain, a choice made with clear eyes and full awareness of consequences. When they broke apart, Vivian rested her forehead against his. This is dangerous. You keep saying that because it keeps being true. Every day we do this, every moment we spend together, we're building something that's going to be impossible to hide. And when it comes out, not if when, it's going to explode. Then maybe we should tell people before it explodes. Vivian pulled back. Tell people what exactly? That the CEO is sleeping with a senior accountant? We're not sleeping together. Semantics. The perception is the same, and perception is everything in corporate culture. So what do you want to do? Keep hiding? Pretend this isn't happening? I want to be realistic about what this costs. For both of us. But especially for you. She moved away, creating space between them. I have power, Ethan. Position. If this becomes public, I'll face questions about judgment and professionalism, but I'll survive. You? You'll be the junior employee who slept his way toward influence. Fair or not, that's how it plays. I'm willing to take that risk. I'm not willing to let you. Not until we know if this is real or just two lonely people playing house during the holidays. The words stung, even though he knew she was right. They'd known each other less than a week. 1 week of coffee and conversation and careful vulnerability. That wasn't love. That was possibility maybe, but not certainty. So what do we do? Ethan asked. We keep being careful. We finish this week. We see if this survives when real life starts again. She picked up her coffee, took a long drink. And we don't make promises we can't keep. The rest of that day was quieter, weighted with the reality they'd been avoiding. They ate bagels and talked about safer things, books they'd read, movies they'd seen, the absurdity of New Year's resolutions that never lasted past January. But something had shifted. The bubble they'd been living in had developed a crack, and cold reality was seeping through. By New Year's Eve, they'd settled into a routine that felt dangerously close to domestic. Vivian showed up at Ethan's apartment with takeout. They ate on his couch while watching whatever streaming service offered, arguing about plot holes and character motivation like they'd been doing it for years instead of days. What's your resolution? Vivian asked as midnight approached. The TV was showing the countdown from Times Square, though neither of them was paying much attention. I don't make resolutions. They're just opportunities to disappoint yourself. Cynical. Realistic. You? I make them every year, never keep them past February. She shifted on the couch, tucking her feet under her. This year I resolved to read fewer business books and more fiction, to swim at reasonable hours instead of 5 a.m., to call my mother. Are you going to keep any of those? Probably not. The business books are useful. 5 a.m. swimming means no witnesses, and calling my mother requires emotional capacity I don't have. You could build that capacity. Could, won't. She looked at him. What would you resolve to do if you made resolutions? Ethan thought about it. I'd resolve to stop being so careful, to take risks, to play guitar again even if I'm terrible, to stop choosing safety over satisfaction. That's specific. I've had time to think about it. And have you? Stopped being careful? I'm here with you, aren't I? That's the least careful thing I've done in years. Vivian smiled, but it was sad. We're both so broken. You realize that, right? Two people who chose careers over lives, success over connection. We're not some romantic redemption story. We're just lonely. Maybe lonely people deserve connection too. Or maybe we're too damaged to build anything that lasts. The countdown started on TV, 10 seconds to midnight, 10 seconds to a new year that would bring back the office, the hierarchy, the reality they'd been hiding from. At midnight, Vivian kissed him, and it tasted like goodbye. "I should go," she said when the kiss ended. "Before this gets more complicated. It's already complicated." "I know, that's the problem." She stood, gathered her coat. "Thank you. For this week. For seeing me as something other than a title. For being patient with my mess." "Vivian, I'll see you at the office day after tomorrow. Back to reality." She left before he could argue, and Ethan sat alone in his apartment while fireworks exploded somewhere in the distance and the new year began without ceremony. He picked up his phone a dozen times to text her. Put it down a dozen times without sending anything. What was there to say? They'd agreed to see if this was real, and Vivian had just answered that question by walking out the door. The text came at 2 a.m. "I'm sorry. I'm terrible at this. I want to be brave, and I keep choosing fear instead. You deserve better." He typed back, "I don't want better. I want you. Complicated and scared and running away at midnight. All of it. You say that now. Wait until the office politics start. Wait until people are whispering about us in the break room. Wait until your career is collateral damage in my scandal. What if we don't wait? What if we're honest? Tell HR, disclose the relationship, do everything by the book." The response took 5 minutes. "And then what? I'm still your CEO. You still report to people who report to me. The power dynamic doesn't change just because we filed paperwork, so we eliminate the power dynamic. I transfer departments, move to a different division. We make it clean. You do that? Give up your position in audit? You've worked 5 years to get where you are. I'd do that for a chance at something real. Wouldn't you?" Another long pause. "I don't know. I've never had to choose before. Work always won by default. This doesn't have to be work versus us. We can figure it out. Can we? Or are we just delusional?" Ethan stared at his phone, at the conversation that was happening at 2 a.m. on New Year's Day, and realized they'd reached the edge of possibility. Either they jumped or they didn't. Either they chose the risk or they chose safety. He called her instead of texting. She answered on the first ring. "Ethan, come back. Right now. Come back and we'll figure this out together, instead of you spiraling alone in your apartment." "It's 2 a.m. I don't care. Come back." "This is crazy." "Probably. Come anyway." She hung up. For 3 minutes, Ethan thought he'd pushed too hard, asked for too much. Then his buzzer rang. Vivian stood in his doorway in the same clothes she'd left in, her hair windblown from the walk, her eyes bright with something that might have been tears or might have been determination. "I'm a coward," she said without preamble. "I'm terrified of this. Of you. Of what happens if I let myself care and it falls apart like everything else I've ever tried to build that wasn't corporate success. I know. I'm going to sabotage this. It's what I do. I'll find reasons why it won't work and I'll use them as weapons against both of us. Probably. I'm difficult and controlling and I have no idea how to be in a healthy relationship. I'm aware. Then why do you want this?" Ethan stepped aside, let her in, closed the door behind her. "Because I've spent 15 years being careful and responsible and successful, and I'm tired of being alone. Because you're brilliant and damaged and real in ways that scare me and attract me in equal measure. Because this week with you has been the most alive I've felt in years, and I'm not ready to give that up just because it's complicated." Vivian stood in the middle of his small apartment, surrounded by his books and his mess and the evidence of a life less curated than hers, and something in her expression cracked open. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." "What if we can't?" "Then at least we tried. At least we didn't choose fear." She crossed to him, took his face in her hands, studied him like she was memorizing his features. "If we do this, if we really do this, it has to be honest. Completely honest. No hiding, no pretending it's casual when it's not. No protecting each other from hard truths." "Agreed." "And we tell HR. First day back. We disclose everything, deal with whatever consequences come." "Okay." "And if it gets too complicated, if the power dynamic becomes a problem, we address it immediately, no letting it fester." "Yes." "And you have to promise me something." Her voice dropped to something quieter, more vulnerable. Promise me you won't sacrifice your career for this. For me. I can't carry that guilt. Vivian, promise me. Please. If it comes down to your job or this relationship, you choose your job. You've worked too hard to throw it away. What about you? What do you choose if it comes to that? I'm the CEO. I have options you don't. I can restructure, redistribute power, make changes that protect both of us, but only if you promise not to be noble and self-sacrificing about it. Ethan pulled her close, felt her heart racing against his chest. I promise to be honest with you about what I'm willing to sacrifice. That's the best I can do. That's not what I asked for. It's what you're getting. She laughed against his shoulder, and it sounded like relief and terror mixed together. We're going to be a disaster. Probably, but we'll be a disaster together. They spent the rest of that night talking through logistics like they were planning a corporate merger instead of a relationship. When to tell HR. How to handle questions. What boundaries to set at the office. Who needed to know and who could be kept in the dark. By the time the sun came up on January 1st, they had a plan. Imperfect, fragile, but a plan nonetheless. Vivian would speak to her assistant first thing when the office reopened. Sarah Chen had been with her for 8 years and could be trusted with sensitive information. Together, they'd approach HR with a formal disclosure of the relationship and a proposal for how to manage the conflict of interest. Ethan would request a transfer to the corporate strategy division, a lateral move that removed him from the direct chain of command that led to Vivian. It meant leaving audit, leaving the comfortable position he'd built, but it eliminated the immediate power dynamic problem. They'd be discreet at the office, but honest with the people who mattered. No sneaking around, no lies, but no grand announcements either. Let people draw their own conclusions, deal with questions if and when they came. This is going to cause problems, Vivian said as dawn broke over the city. They were still on his couch, coffee growing cold on the table, plans sketched out on the back of an envelope like battle strategy. Probably, but we're going into it with eyes open. That counts for something. Does it? Or are we just naive? Time will tell. She looked at him, and for the first time since he'd met her in that bar on Christmas night, she looked hopeful. Terrified, but hopeful. I'm glad I met you, Ethan Hale. Even if this crashes and burns spectacularly, I'm glad. We're not going to crash and burn. You don't know that. No, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway. That's what faith is. I don't do faith. I do data and strategy and calculated risk. Then calculate this. He took her hand, laced their fingers together. What are the odds that two lonely people find each other in a dive bar on Christmas night and actually make something work? Statistically, terrible. Maybe 5% success rate, and that's being generous. And yet we're trying anyway. That's either courage or stupidity. I vote stupidity. I vote courage. Vivian smiled, and it transformed her face the way it always did. Made her look younger, lighter, like the person she might have been if she'd chosen differently all those years ago. Okay, courage it is. Stupid, terrifying courage. They spent New Year's Day together, doing nothing and everything. Watching movies neither of them paid attention to. Ordering pizza that arrived cold because they forgot to answer the door. Talking about childhoods and dreams and all the small moments that had led them to this unlikely intersection of lives. When Vivian finally left that evening, promising to meet him at the office day after tomorrow, Ethan stood at his window and watched the city lights come on against the growing dark. In 2 days, their secret week would end and reality would begin. In 2 days, they'd face HR and office politics and all the complications they'd been avoiding. But tonight, on the first day of a new year, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. He felt possibility. He felt hope. He felt like maybe, just maybe, choosing risk over safety was the smartest thing he'd ever done. His phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was giving up on myself. He typed back, thank you for taking the risk, for choosing courage over fear. I'm still terrified. Me too. But we're terrified together. That's something. See you day after tomorrow. Ready to face the consequences. Ready. Ethan set down his phone and picked up his guitar. For the first time in 8 years, he played. Not because he had to, Not because anyone was listening, but because he wanted to. Because Vivian had reminded him that giving up dreams didn't make them disappear, it just made them into ghosts that haunted the edges of carefully constructed lives. The music was rusty, uncertain, nothing like the fluid playing of his college days. But it was real. It was honest. It was the sound of someone choosing to be alive instead of just successful. 2 floors below, a neighbor pounded on the ceiling and yelled about the noise. Ethan smiled and kept playing. Across town, in a $17 million penthouse that finally looked lived in, Vivian Cross sat surrounded by romance novels and unread reports, and for the first time in 15 years, she chose the novels. She read until midnight, losing herself in stories of people who chose love over logic, risk over safety, messy humanity over perfect success. When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of dive bars and December snow and a senior accountant who saw her as human instead of a title. And for once, her dreams felt more real than the corporate empire she'd built. The countdown to reality had begun. In 48 hours, their private world would collide with professional consequences. In 48 hours, they'd learn if courage was enough to build something lasting from the fragments of 2 broken people trying to be whole. But tonight, they had hope. And sometimes hope was all you needed to take the first step toward a life that felt worth living. The Meridian Financial Tower felt different on the first day back after the holidays. The usual January energy, people returning tanned from tropical vacations or sluggish from too much family time, filled the elevators and break rooms with a hum of renewed purpose. Ethan rode up to the 14th floor with a knot in his stomach that had nothing to do with the lukewarm coffee he'd grabbed from the lobby. He'd texted Vivian that morning. Brief. Professional. Good luck today. Her response came immediately. You too. Remember the plan. The plan. Tell HR. Request the transfer. Be honest. Let the consequences fall where they would. Simple on paper. Terrifying in practice. Ethan made it to his desk and was logging into his computer when his phone rang. Internal extension. Sarah Chen, Vivian's assistant. Ethan Hale speaking. Mr. Hale, this is Sarah Chen. Ms. Cross would like to see you in her office at 9. Is that convenient? His heart stopped. They'd agreed to handle things separately, Vivian with HR, Ethan with his transfer request. Calling him to her office on day 1 was not part of the plan. Of course, 9 o'clock. Thank you. I'll let her know you're coming. The line went dead and Ethan stared at his phone like it might offer explanations. Around him, the audit department was coming to life. Colleagues swapping holiday stories, complaining about weight gain, discussing the new quarterly targets that had arrived in their inboxes like unwelcome party guests. Marcus from the cubicle next to him leaned over the partition. You get called to the Ice Queen's office already? What'd you do, mess up a report over break? Just a quarterly review follow-up, Ethan lied smoothly. Nothing dramatic. Man, I'd rather face a tax audit than a one-on-one with Cross. She's brilliant, but terrifying. She's not that bad. Marcus laughed. Right, and I'm not that hungover. Good luck up there. Try not to get fired on day 1. The walk to the executive floor at 9 felt like a march to execution. Ethan had been up here exactly twice before. Once for the Lawson Award ceremony, once to deliver emergency documents during a crisis 3 years ago. The 32nd floor was a different world from his cubicle farm. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Art on the walls that probably cost more than his annual salary. Silence broken only by the soft clicks of expensive keyboards and the hushed voices of executive assistants managing empires. Sarah Chen looked up when he approached. She was in her mid-30s, sharply dressed, with the kind of efficiency that came from managing a CEO's impossible schedule for nearly a decade. Mr. Hale, go right in. She's expecting you. Thank you. He knocked once, heard Vivian's voice call out, Come in, and pushed through the door into the corner office he'd seen from the street but never entered. It was exactly what he expected and nothing like Vivian's apartment. Chrome and glass and leather furniture that looked designed for intimidation rather than comfort. A desk the size of a small car, covered in neat stacks of reports, and a laptop that probably controlled half the company's operations. Floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city spread out below like a conquered territory. Vivian stood by the windows, dressed in a charcoal suit that screamed power and authority. Her hair was pulled back in the severe bun he recognized from quarterly meetings. Everything about her posture said CEO, controlled, commanding, untouchable. Then she turned, and her eyes met his, and for just a second, he saw the woman who'd eaten cold pizza on his couch and read romance novels until midnight. "Close the door," she said quietly. He did. The click of the latch felt final. "Sarah knows," Vivian said without preamble. "I told her this morning. Everything. Christmas night, the week we spent together, our plan to disclose to HR. Us? And she looked at me like I'd grown a second head, asked if I was having a breakdown, then immediately started strategizing how to minimize the damage." Vivian moved away from the window, leaned against her desk. "She's scheduling us with HR for this afternoon, 4 o'clock. Gerald Morrison and the head of legal will be there." "Legal?" "Standard procedure for executive-level relationships. They need to assess liability, conflict of interest, potential for harassment claims." She must have seen something in his expression because she added quickly, "Not that there's any harassment, but they have to cover the company's exposure." This is really happening. This is really happening. Vivian's professional mask slipped slightly. "Are you ready for this? Once we walk into that meeting, there's no going back. The board will know. Your colleagues will find out. Everything changes." Ethan crossed the office, stopped just close enough to lower his voice. "I'm ready. Are you?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." She straightened and the CEO armor snapped back into place. "Until 4 o'clock, we're professional colleagues. Nothing more. Sarah will handle the whispers if anyone noticed you were called up here. After 4, we deal with whatever comes next." "Vivian, I have a board call in 10 minutes. You should go." It was a dismissal, clear and final. But as Ethan turned to leave, she spoke again. "Thank you for doing this, for not running. Where would I run to?" "Anywhere. Most men would choose anywhere over this kind of scrutiny." "I'm not most men." "I know, that's why I'm terrified." He wanted to kiss her, to offer reassurance, to do something other than walk out like they were strangers. But they were in her office, on camera, visible to anyone who might glance through the glass walls. So he left with nothing more than a nod, and the weight of the coming storm settled heavier on his shoulders. The hours until 4 o'clock crawled past like wounded animals. Ethan tried to focus on work. There were reconciliation reports waiting, quarterly audits to begin, the normal rhythm of his job that had nothing to do with the chaos brewing beneath the surface. But every time his phone buzzed, his heart jumped. Every time someone walked past his cubicle, he wondered if they knew. Marcus caught him staring into space around 2. "You okay, man? You've been weird all day." "Fine, just tired. Too much holiday indulgence." "Yeah, I hear that. My wife's already planning next Christmas, and I'm still recovering from this one." Marcus grabbed his coffee mug. "You doing anything for New Year's?" "Quiet night. Nothing special." Liar. He'd spent New Year's Day planning how to dismantle his career for a woman he'd known less than 2 weeks. Nothing special at all. At 3:45, Ethan shut down his computer and headed for the executive floor. HR was on 31, sandwiched between legal and finance like a neutral buffer zone. The conference room Sarah had indicated in her follow-up email was at the end of a long hallway that felt designed to inspire dread. Vivian was already there when he arrived, seated at a table large enough for 20, but set for 6. She'd changed nothing about her appearance since that morning, but something in her posture had shifted. She looked smaller somehow, despite the power suit and the carefully maintained composure. "They're running 5 minutes late," she said when he entered. "Board call went long." Ethan sat across from her, close enough to talk, far enough to maintain professional distance. "How are you holding up?" "I've faced hostile takeovers with less anxiety than this." "That's comforting. It wasn't meant to be." She glanced toward the door, then back at him. "Whatever happens in here, whatever they say or recommend, we stay united. Agreed?" "Agreed." "If they try to force you out, I fight it." "Vivian, I mean it. You're not taking the fall for this alone." Before he could argue, the door opened and 3 people filed in with the grim efficiency of executioners. Gerald Morrison, head of HR, was in his late 50s with silver hair and the kind of face that had perfected neutrality through decades of managing corporate disasters. Beside him was Jennifer Calloway from Legal, sharp-eyed, and already carrying a notepad filled with what Ethan assumed were questions designed to expose every vulnerability. The third person was someone Ethan didn't recognize, a younger woman with an iPad and the quiet competence of someone there to document everything. Ms. Cross, Mr. Hale, thank you for meeting with us. Gerald took the seat at the head of the table, establishing hierarchy without words. I understand you've requested this meeting to disclose a personal relationship that may present a conflict of interest. That's correct, Vivian said, and her voice carried every ounce of CEO authority. Ethan Hale and I began a personal relationship during the holiday week. We're here to formally disclose that relationship and discuss appropriate measures to manage any conflict of interest. Jennifer leaned forward. When exactly did this relationship begin, Ms. Cross? Christmas night. And the nature of this relationship? We're dating, seeing each other, whatever terminology you prefer. Is this relationship intimate in nature? Vivian's jaw tightened. That's not relevant to conflict of interest. I'm afraid it is. If there's a physical component, it changes the liability exposure. Then yes, the relationship is intimate. Ethan watched Gerald make a note, watched Jennifer's expression remain carefully neutral, and felt the first stirrings of anger beneath his anxiety. They were reducing something real to legal terminology and risk assessment. Mr. Hale, Gerald said, turning his attention. You're a senior accountant in the audit division, is that correct? Yes. And you report to Director Marcus Chen, who reports to VP Sarah Williams, who reports ultimately to Ms. Cross. Yes. So there is a direct chain of command between you and Ms. Cross. Yes, which is why I'm formally requesting a transfer to corporate strategy. Lateral move, same pay grade, removes the direct reporting relationship. That got a reaction, a slight lift of Gerald's eyebrows, a glance exchanged between him and Jennifer. You've given this some thought, Jennifer said. We both have, Ethan replied. We're not here asking permission to ignore policy. We're here to disclose the relationship and take appropriate steps to manage it ethically. Commendable. However, the issue isn't just direct reporting. Ms. Cross is the CEO. Every employee ultimately reports to her. A lateral transfer doesn't eliminate the inherent power dynamic. Vivian spoke up, which is why I'm prepared to discuss additional measures. If corporate strategy isn't sufficient separation, we can explore external options. Mr. Hale has significant experience that would be valuable to our partner firms. A referral arrangement could— Ms. Cross, Gerald interrupted gently, I appreciate your willingness to find solutions. But let's be clear about the situation. This isn't just about policy compliance. This is about optics. The CEO of Meridian Financial is in a relationship with a junior employee. That's going to raise questions about favoritism, about judgment, about whether this relationship affects business decisions. I understand that. Do you? Because the board will have concerns. Investors will have concerns. This could affect quarterly confidence, stock prices, your ability to lead effectively. My personal life doesn't affect my professional capabilities. Perhaps not, but perception often matters more than reality in corporate governance. Gerald folded his hands on the table. I need to ask you both some difficult questions. Please answer honestly. The interrogation that followed was methodical and humiliating. When had the relationship begun? Had there been any prior contact? Had Ethan ever received preferential treatment? Had Vivian ever made decisions regarding Ethan's employment? Was there any quid pro quo, explicit or implicit? They answered everything truthfully. Christmas night in a bar, no prior contact beyond normal professional interaction, no preferential treatment, no promises of advancement or threat of retaliation. By the time Gerald ran out of questions, an hour had passed and Ethan felt like he'd been through a deposition. I appreciate your candor, Gerald said finally. Here's what happens next. We'll present this disclosure to the board. They'll review and provide guidance on appropriate next steps. In the meantime, Mr. Hale, your transfer request will be processed on an expedited basis. Ms. Cross, you'll need to recuse yourself from any decisions regarding Mr. Hale's employment, compensation, or performance reviews. Understood. Additionally, we strongly recommend discretion. While you're not required to hide the relationship, public displays of affection in the workplace, discussions of personal matters in professional settings, and any appearance of favoritism should be avoided. We understand, Ethan said. Jennifer spoke up. One more thing. If this relationship ends badly, if there are allegations of harassment or retaliation or any behavior that creates a hostile work environment, the company will take immediate action. That could include termination, legal action, and public disclosure. I need you both to acknowledge that you understand the stakes. We understand, Vivian said, and there was steel in her voice. Is there anything else? Not at this time. We'll be in touch within 48 hours with the board's response. They were dismissed like errant children called to the principal's office. Ethan walked out first, conscious of the need to maintain separation. Vivian followed 2 minutes later. They didn't speak, didn't acknowledge each other in the elevator down. It wasn't until Ethan was back at his desk, staring at reports he couldn't focus on, that his phone buzzed. My apartment. 7 o'clock. We need to talk. He typed back. I'll be there. The rest of the afternoon was torture. Every glance from a colleague felt loaded with suspicion. Every casual conversation felt like a minefield. Marcus asked if the meeting with HR went okay, and Ethan lied smoothly about routine policy updates. At 6:30, he left the office and walked to Vivian's building through January cold that had teeth. The city looked the same, indifferent, gleaming, busy with people living their uncomplicated lives. But Ethan felt like he was walking through a different world now, one where every choice had consequences that rippled outward in ways he couldn't control. Marcus the doorman greeted him by name now. Evening, Mr. Hale. Ms. Cross is expecting you. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. When the doors opened into Vivian's apartment, she was standing by the windows again, still in her work clothes, a glass of red wine in her hand. That was worse than I expected, she said without turning around. Yeah. They made it sound like we committed a crime. Corporate policy is designed to protect the company, not the people. She turned to face him, and he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Are you having second thoughts? Because if you are, now's the time to say so, before the board weighs in, before this gets messier. Are you? I asked first. Ethan crossed the apartment, took the wine glass from her hand, set it on the side table. He took both her hands in his and met her eyes with all the certainty he could muster. No, I'm not having second thoughts. I'm angry that we have to justify caring about each other. I'm frustrated that corporate policy treats human connection like a liability. But I'm not doubting this. Us. Vivian's expression cracked, and suddenly she wasn't the CEO anymore. She was just someone who'd been holding herself together through sheer force of will and had finally reached the breaking point. I thought I could handle this. The scrutiny, the questions, the lawyers treating our relationship like a legal problem to be solved. Her voice wavered. But sitting in that room answering those questions, I felt like I was defending something that shouldn't need defending. Like we did something wrong by being human. We didn't do anything wrong. Then why does it feel like we're being punished? Because the system isn't designed for people like us. It's designed for hierarchy and control and maintaining the status quo. We're disrupting that. Of course there's resistance. She pulled her hands free, wrapped her arms around herself. What if the board says no? What if they tell me it's the relationship or the company? Then you have a choice to make. That's not helpful. What do you want me to say? That I'll walk away if it gets too hard? That I'll sacrifice this to make your life easier? I won't. I can't. I'm not asking you to sacrifice anything. I'm asking what happens if the choice is forced. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. If the board forces that choice, then you need to decide what kind of life you want. The one you've been living, successful, powerful, and alone. Or the possibility of something different, even if it costs you the corner office. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's the hardest choice you'll probably ever make. But it's still a choice. Vivian moved to the couch, collapsed onto it with the boneless exhaustion of someone who'd been running on adrenaline for too long. I've spent 15 years building this career. Everything I am, everything I've accomplished is tied to Meridian. If I walk away, who am I? You're Vivian Cross, brilliant, complicated, human. The CEO title doesn't define you unless you let it. Easy for you to say, you're not the one facing that choice. I'm facing my own version. If I stay at Meridian with you, my career becomes a footnote to yours. Every achievement will be questioned. Every promotion will be attributed to favoritism. I'll be the guy who slept with the boss. Forever. That's what I'm choosing, so don't act like I don't understand sacrifice. She looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. You're right. I'm sorry. We're both risking everything. I'm just terrified of losing and taking you down with me. Then let's not lose. How? The board could force my hand. Policy could require one of us to leave. The optics could become untenable. Or none of that happens. Or it does happen, and we deal with it. Together. Stop catastrophizing every possible outcome and focus on what we can control right now. Which is what, exactly? We wait for the board's response. We follow whatever guidelines they set. We keep being honest with each other and with HR. We don't hide, but we don't flaunt it either. We do everything right and hope that's enough. Vivian laughed bitterly. You're asking me to have faith in a system designed to protect itself, not us. I'm asking you to have faith in us, that what we have is worth fighting for, regardless of what the system says. She was quiet for a long time, just sitting there with her defenses down and her vulnerability showing. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. I'm not good at faith. I'm good at control, at strategy, at managing outcomes. I can't control any of it. And that terrifies me more than anything the board could say. Ethan sat beside her, close but not touching. I know, but maybe that's the point. Maybe the things worth having are the things we can't control, the things that require trust instead of strategy. That's a terrible business model. Good thing this isn't business. She leaned against him then, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and they sat in silence while the city lights came on outside and the weight of the day finally settled into something bearable. Stay tonight, Vivian said quietly. I just don't want to be alone. Okay. They ordered dinner, neither of them ate. Watched a movie, neither of them followed. Eventually migrated to her bedroom, where Ethan discovered that the woman who lived in minimalist perfection kept her bed piled with pillows and blankets like a nest. They slept in their clothes, curled together like survivors of a shipwreck, and when Ethan woke at 3 a.m. to find Vivian staring at the ceiling, he didn't ask what she was thinking. He just held her tighter and hoped it was enough. The board's response came the next afternoon in the form of an email to both of them and a formal meeting request for the following Monday. Ethan read it 3 times, trying to parse the corporate language for actual meaning. The board has reviewed the disclosure regarding the personal relationship between CEO Vivian Cross and senior accountant Ethan Hale. While we appreciate the proactive disclosure and proposed conflict management strategies, the board has concerns regarding optics, governance, and potential liability. A formal meeting has been scheduled for Monday, January 6th at 10 a.m. to discuss next steps and establish clear guidelines moving forward. Attendance is mandatory. Vivian called him 5 minutes after the email arrived. They're not saying no, she said without preamble, but they're not saying yes either. What do you think they'll say Monday? I think they'll give me an ultimatum. End the relationship or step down as CEO. You don't know that. I know the board. I know how they think. This is a liability they'll want eliminated, and the easiest way to do that is to eliminate the source. So what do? We go to the meeting, we make our case. We remind them that my personal life doesn't affect my professional capabilities. We hope it's enough. And if it's not, the pause on the other end of the line was long enough that Ethan thought the call had dropped. Then I make a choice, Vivian said finally, and I live with the consequences. They spent the weekend preparing like they were going into battle. Vivian compiled 15 years of performance metrics, proving her value to the company was measurable and undeniable. Ethan drafted his transfer request with a detailed plan for how his move to corporate strategy would eliminate any appearance of impropriety. By Sunday night, they had a presentation that could convince a hostile jury. Whether it would convince a board of directors more concerned with optics than fairness remained to be seen. Ethan met Vivian at her apartment Sunday evening to review their materials one last time. She answered the door in jeans and a sweater, the most casual he'd seen her outside of their private moments, and he could see the toll the stress was taking. Dark circles under her eyes, a tightness around her mouth that spoke of tension held too long. "We're ready," she said, leading him inside. "As ready as we can be. Then we should stop preparing and try to relax." "I don't know how to relax when my entire career is on the line." "Have you eaten today?" "Coffee counts as food." "No, it doesn't." Ethan pulled out his phone. "I'm ordering actual food. You're going to eat it. Then we're going to watch something mindless and try to think about anything other than tomorrow." "That's not a suggestion. You're running on fumes and adrenaline. That's not going to help you in the boardroom." For a moment he thought she'd argue. Instead, she smiled, tired but genuine. "When did you become the bossy one?" "Someone has to be. You're too busy catastrophizing." They ate Thai food on her couch while a nature documentary played in the background. Vivian picked at her food but ate more than she probably had all weekend. By the time the documentary ended with predators and prey finding their precarious balance, she was leaning against him with her eyes closed. "Thank you," she murmured. "For this. For not letting me spiral." "That's what partners do." "Partners. Is that what we are?" "What would you call it?" She was quiet for a moment. "I'd call it the scariest thing I've ever done. And I've negotiated billion-dollar mergers." "Scary but worth it?" "Ask me again after tomorrow." They went to bed early, knowing sleep wouldn't come easy, but needing to try anyway. Ethan held Vivian in the dark while Chicago hummed outside the windows, and thought about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. The board could force her out. They could demand he be fired. They could create guidelines so restrictive that maintaining the relationship became impossible. Or they could do the reasonable thing and accept that human beings were more than their job titles. Ethan wasn't optimistic enough to bet on reason, but he held on to hope anyway. Beside him, Vivian's breathing eventually evened out into sleep, and Ethan followed her into dreams that felt less like rest and more like rehearsal for battles yet to come. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tomorrow they'd learn if courage was enough, or if the system would crush them for daring to choose connection over convenience. But tonight, they had each other. And in the uncertain darkness before dawn, that had to be enough. The boardroom on the 32nd floor was designed to intimidate. 20-foot ceilings, a table that could seat 30, and walls lined with portraits of past CEOs who stared down like judges from another era. Ethan had never been in this room before. Most employees went their entire careers without seeing the inside of the executive sanctum, where the real power of Meridian Financial made its decisions. He sat beside Vivian at one end of the massive table, while 9 board members occupied the other end like a tribunal. Gerald Morrison and Jennifer Calloway flanked them as witnesses or perhaps referees. The air conditioning was set too cold, probably deliberately, and Ethan could see Vivian's jaw tighten with tension she was trying to hide. Robert Chen, the board chairman, sat at the head of the table. He was 72, silver-haired, and had been on Meridian's board for 23 years. He'd hired Vivian as CEO 7 years ago when the company was hemorrhaging money and reputation. She'd saved them, built them into one of the most profitable financial firms in the Midwest. And now they were sitting in judgment of her personal life like she was a child who'd broken curfew. "Ms. Cross, Mr. Hale, thank you for meeting with us." Robert's voice was measured, giving nothing away. "We've reviewed your disclosure and the proposed conflict management strategies. We appreciate your transparency in bringing this matter to our attention." "Thank you," Vivian said, and her CEO voice was flawless, controlled, professional, revealing nothing of the woman who'd barely slept the night before. "However," Robert continued, and that single word landed like a gavel, "the board has significant concerns about the optics and potential liability of this relationship. Ms. Cross, you are the public face of this company. Your judgment, your decision-making, your personal conduct, all of it reflects on Meridian's reputation and shareholder confidence." "I understand that, which is why we've been completely transparent and proposed concrete steps to manage any conflict of interest." Patricia Morrison, the only other woman on the board, leaned forward. "The issue isn't just conflict of interest, Vivian. It's perception. You're 42 years old, CEO of a billion-dollar company. Mr. Hale is, forgive me for being blunt, a junior employee nearly a decade your junior. The power dynamic is inherently problematic." "Mr. Hale is 34, Vivian corrected coolly. 8 years is hardly scandalous, and the power dynamic is exactly why we're here, to address it proactively rather than hide it. By asking him to transfer departments, that doesn't eliminate the fundamental imbalance. You're still his ultimate superior. Ethan spoke up for the first time. With respect, Miss Morrison, I'm not a victim here. I'm a grown man who entered this relationship with full awareness of the implications. Treating me like I can't make my own decisions is more insulting than the power dynamic you're worried about. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Robert's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Maybe surprise, maybe respect. Mr. Hale, no one is suggesting you're a victim, Robert said, but we have a responsibility to consider how this relationship affects the company. If it becomes public knowledge, and in today's environment, everything becomes public eventually, how do we explain it to shareholders, to clients, to the employees who work under both of you? You explain it the same way you'd explain any relationship between consenting adults, Ethan said. With the facts. We met. We connected. We disclosed it appropriately and took steps to manage any conflict. If people choose to make it sordid, that says more about them than us. But idealistic but naive, another board member, Thomas Wade, interjected. The court of public opinion doesn't care about facts. They care about narrative. And the narrative here is CEO sleeps with subordinate. That's not a story that helps Meridian's reputation. Vivian's voice went cold. So you'd rather I lie? Hide my personal life? Pretend to be the ice queen the media loves to write about because it's better for optics? We'd rather you exercise better judgment, Patricia said quietly. You're brilliant, Vivian, one of the best CEOs I've worked with. But this is a distraction we don't need. The market is volatile. We're heading into a challenging fiscal year. The last thing we need is a scandal that undermines confidence in leadership. This isn't a scandal, it's a relationship. It becomes a scandal the moment it hits the press. And it will hit the press. Someone will leak it. Someone always does. The room fell silent. Ethan could feel Vivian vibrating with suppressed anger beside him, could see her hands clenched white-knuckled on the table. Robert cleared his throat. We've discussed several options. I'll be frank with you about what the board is considering. Here it comes, Ethan thought. The ultimatum. Option 1. Ms. Cross ends the relationship immediately. Mr. Hale transfers to another department as planned, and we move forward as if this conversation never happened. Clean break, minimal disruption. Not acceptable, Vivian said flatly. Option 2. Ms. Cross steps down as CEO. She can retain a board position and consulting role, but day-to-day leadership transfers to someone without this particular complication. Mr. Hale remains in his current position, no transfer necessary. Also not acceptable. Option 3, Robert continued as if she hadn't spoken, and this is the one we're leaning toward. Ms. Cross takes a leave of absence. 3 months paid with the understanding that during this time, you both determine if this relationship is serious enough to warrant the professional sacrifices it requires. If at the end of 3 months you decide to continue the relationship, we revisit the conversation about appropriate next steps. If you end it, you return as CEO with no questions asked. Vivian stared at him. You want me to take a leave of absence? From my own company? From the company you work for, Patricia corrected gently. You're CEO, Vivian, but you're not owner. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to act in Meridian's best interests. Right now, this situation is a liability we need to manage. This is insane. I've given this company everything. I saved it from bankruptcy. I've exceeded every performance metric you've set, and you're punishing me for being in a relationship? We're not punishing you, Robert said. We're giving you time to determine if this relationship is worth the cost. 3 months to figure out if what you have with Mr. Hale is real or if it's, forgive me, a midlife crisis that will pass if given space to breathe. Ethan felt Vivian go rigid beside him. When she spoke, her voice could have cut glass. I don't need 3 months to know what this is. I need you to trust that I can manage my personal life without it affecting my professional capabilities. We do trust your capabilities. We're less certain about your judgment right now. My judgment is sound. It's your double standard that's the problem. If I were a male CEO in a relationship with a female employee, we wouldn't be having this conversation. That's not fair, Patricia started. It's completely fair. You want to know why I'm single at 42? Because I spent 15 years proving I could do this job better than any man. I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. I sacrificed relationships and family and anything that might make me look weak or emotional or human. And the first time I dare to actually have a personal life, you treat it like a failure of judgment. The room was silent. Even Robert looked uncomfortable. Vivian, he said quietly, this isn't about gender. It's about timing and optics, and it's about control. You're uncomfortable with the idea that I have a life outside these walls, so you're trying to force me to choose career or relationship, success or happiness, like they're mutually exclusive. That's not what we're saying. It's exactly what you're saying. Vivian stood, and Ethan saw the woman he'd met in that bar on Christmas night, raw, angry, done with pretending. I've given this company 15 years of my life, 70-hour weeks, missed holidays, relationships I never started because I was too busy proving myself. And it's still not enough. I'm still being judged for daring to be human. Miss Cross, please sit down. No, I'm done sitting down. I'm done pretending that success means isolation. I'm done sacrificing everything personal for professional approval that's apparently conditional on me staying alone. She looked at each board member in turn. I resign. The word detonated in the room like a grenade. Vivian, wait. Robert stood, genuine alarm in his voice. I resign as CEO, effective immediately. You want to avoid a scandal? Here's your scandal avoidance. I'm choosing to walk away before you force me out. I'm choosing the relationship over the corner office. I'm choosing to actually live my life instead of performing for approval I'll never fully earn. You can't be serious, Patricia said. You've worked too hard to throw it away for what? For love? For connection? For the possibility of building something that matters more than quarterly earnings? Vivian's laugh was bitter. You're right, I have worked too hard, which is exactly why I'm done working myself to death for a company that sees my humanity as a liability. Ethan stood slowly. Vivian, think about this. I have thought about it. I've thought about nothing else for 3 days, and I'm done thinking. She looked at Robert. Draft whatever press release you want, stepping down for personal reasons, pursuing new opportunities. I don't care. Just make it clean. This is a mistake, Robert said, and he sounded genuinely concerned. You're making a decision out of emotion. I'm making a decision out of clarity. For the first time in 15 years, I'm seeing clearly. Success without happiness is just expensive loneliness. I've had enough loneliness to last a lifetime. She turned and walked out of the boardroom without waiting for dismissal, leaving 9 shocked board members and 1 terrified boyfriend in her wake. Ethan looked at Robert, at the assembled board members who were staring at the door like they couldn't quite believe what had just happened. For what it's worth, he said quietly, she's right, about all of it. Then he followed Vivian out, because some choices were more important than careers. He found her in the stairwell, leaning against the wall with her eyes closed and her chest heaving like she'd just run a marathon. When she heard his footsteps, her eyes flew open. Tell me I didn't just do that, she said. You just did that. Tell me I didn't just throw away 15 years of work for a relationship that's barely 2 weeks old. I can't tell you that either. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold concrete floor, and Ethan sat beside her, shoulder to shoulder in the industrial stairwell that smelled of dust and cleaning solution. I panicked, Vivian said. They were going to force me out anyway. I just beat them to it. Maybe. Or maybe you finally chose yourself. I don't know how to be unemployed. I don't know who I am without the CEO title. You're Vivian Cross. Brilliant, stubborn, and apparently capable of dramatic exits that will be talked about for years. She laughed, and it sounded half hysterical. What did I just do? You quit your job to be with me, which is either the most romantic thing ever or completely insane. Probably both. She turned to look at him. Are you okay? I just made our relationship the reason the CEO of Meridian Financial resigned. That's going to follow you. Let it follow me. I'm not ashamed of us. You should be. This is a disaster. This is freedom. You've been trapped in that corner office for 15 years, Vivian. Maybe this is your chance to figure out what you actually want instead of what you think you should want. She was quiet for a long time, just sitting on the floor of a stairwell in her expensive suit, looking more lost than he'd ever seen her. I have no plan, she said finally. I've always had a plan. 5-year strategies, quarterly goals, contingency plans for every scenario. And now I have nothing. You have me. If you want. That's not a plan. That's chaos. Maybe you need chaos. Maybe we both do. Sarah Chen found them 20 minutes later, still sitting on the floor like refugees from corporate warfare. She stopped in the doorway, took in the scene, and sighed. The board is in full panic mode, she said. They're drafting emergency press releases and trying to figure out succession planning. Robert wants to know if you'll reconsider. No, Vivian said without hesitation. I thought you'd say that. So I took the liberty of clearing out your office. Your personal items are being packed as we speak. Security will escort you out in 30 minutes. They're throwing me out? Standard protocol for executive resignations. Prevent sabotage or data theft. You know the drill. Vivian laughed. I literally wrote that protocol. I know, the irony isn't lost on me. Sarah sat on the step beside them. For what it's worth, I think you're brave. Stupid maybe, but brave. Most people never have the courage to walk away from success, even when it's killing them. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. Brave people are always terrified. That's what makes it brave. Sarah handed Vivian a folder. Your severance package. It's generous. They don't want a lawsuit. Plus, your stock options vested last year. You're not going to starve. What about you? Are you out of a job? The new CEO will need an assistant. I'll survive. The question is, will you? Vivian looked at Ethan, then back at Sarah. I honestly don't know. Security did escort them out 30 minutes later. Box of personal items, visitor badges surrendered, the efficient machinery of corporate separation grinding through its motions. Ethan's transfer request was denied. He could stay and audit or resign, and he chose resignation without a second thought. Marcus caught him at his desk while he was packing his own box of belongings. What the hell happened? Marcus demanded. Marcus, rumor is Cross just quit and you're walking out with her. That's basically accurate. Are you insane? You're throwing away your career for… what? An office romance? It's more than that. It better be. Because your professional reputation just got torched. Ethan looked around at the cubicle farm that had been his world for 5 years. The beige walls and fluorescent lighting and the quiet desperation of people grinding through spreadsheets because it was safer than dreaming. You know what, Marcus? I'm okay with that. I'd rather have a torched reputation and a real life than a pristine resume and nothing else worth remembering. He walked out of Meridian Financial at 3 p.m. with a box of office supplies and no plan for what came next. Vivian was waiting on the sidewalk, her own box balanced on one hip, looking shell-shocked. We're unemployed, she said. Yeah. Both of us, at the same time, because of a relationship that started 2 weeks ago. When you say it like that, it sounds crazy. It is crazy. Ethan set down his box and took hers, stacking them on top of each other. Then he took her hands and looked at her, really looked at the woman who'd just walked away from everything she'd built because the cost of keeping it was too high. So what do we do now? He asked. I have no idea. I've never been unemployed in my adult life. Me either. Should we panic? Probably, or we could get very drunk. Or we could figure out what we actually want, now that we're not defined by job titles. Vivian smiled, and it was real. That's terrifying. Good. Let's do it anyway. They went back to her apartment, neutral ground that felt less loaded than making decisions. Ethan ordered pizza while Vivian changed out of her CEO uniform into jeans and a sweater. When she emerged from her bedroom, she looked younger, lighter, like she'd shed armor that had been weighing her down for years. I can't believe I quit, she said, collapsing onto the couch. I keep waiting to feel regret or panic, but mostly I just feel tired. That's probably normal. You've been running on adrenaline for 15 years. What if I made a huge mistake? Then we deal with it, together. You keep saying that, together, like it's simple. It is simple. It's just not easy. The pizza arrived, and they ate in silence while the city moved on outside the windows, indifferent to their small revolution. When the food was gone, Vivian pulled out her laptop, not the corporate one she'd surrendered, but a personal device she barely used, and opened a blank document. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked. "Making a list. Things I want to do now that I'm not CEO." "Such as?" "I don't know yet. That's why I'm making the list." She typed a few words, deleted them, typed again. "Travel. I've never traveled for pleasure. Everything's been business trips and conference hotels. I want to see places that have nothing to do with quarterly earnings." "Where would you go?" "Everywhere. Anywhere. Spain again. I loved the Camino when I walked it years ago. Maybe Thailand, New Zealand, places that are as far from boardrooms as possible." "What else?" "Learn to cook. I know that sounds stupid, but I've spent 15 years ordering takeout or eating at business dinners. I want to know what it feels like to make something with my hands that isn't a merger proposal." Ethan smiled. "I can teach you. I'm not a chef, but I can handle the basics." "Really?" "Really. What else is on the list?" She was quiet for a moment, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I want to call my mother, or at least try. I've spent 3 years avoiding that conversation because I was too busy, too angry, too proud. Maybe now is the time to figure out if there's anything worth salvaging." "That's brave. That's terrifying. But so is everything else about this new life. So why not add one more terrifying thing to the pile?" They spent the rest of the evening building their lists, separate but shared, individual dreams that somehow wove together into possibility. Ethan wrote down playing guitar again, maybe taking lessons, definitely playing in public even if he was terrible. Running a marathon somewhere exotic, writing something that wasn't a financial report. By midnight, they had pages of ideas and no concrete plans, which somehow felt exactly right. "We need jobs eventually," Vivian said, closing her laptop. "Severance won't last forever." "I know, but maybe we don't need to figure that out tonight." "When then?" "When we've had time to breathe, to figure out who we are without the corporate identities we've been wearing for so long." "That could take months." "Then it takes months. We're not on anyone's timeline but our own now." The revelation seemed to hit Vivian physically. She sat back against the couch like the weight of it had knocked her down. No timeline, no quarterly reviews, no performance metrics, just time. "Just time," Ethan agreed. She turned to face him, and there were tears in her eyes. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not running. For following me out when I quit. For believing this is worth the chaos." "Of course it's worth the chaos. You're worth the chaos." She kissed him then, and it was different from before. Not desperate or tentative, but certain. A choice made with clear eyes and full acceptance of consequences. When they broke apart, Vivian was smiling through the tears. "I'm unemployed, terrified, and have no idea what I'm doing with my life." "Same. But I'm happy. For the first time in years, I'm actually happy." "Me too." 3 months later, Ethan proposed in their living room. Not Vivian's penthouse. She'd sold that within weeks of quitting, citing that it was too big, too cold, too much of a monument to the life she was leaving behind. They'd found a smaller place in Lincoln Park. 2 bedrooms, actual kitchen, the kind of apartment where people lived instead of just sleeping between work marathons. The proposal wasn't planned. They were cooking dinner together. Vivian was getting better, though she still burned things with alarming regularity, and arguing about whether garlic needed to be minced or just crushed. And suddenly Ethan was on one knee with a ring he'd bought 2 weeks earlier and been too nervous to present. "Marry me," he said, interrupting her mid-sentence about proper knife technique. Vivian stared at him, wooden spoon still in her hand, tomato sauce dripping onto the floor. "What?" "Marry me. Let's make this official. Let's build something together that's ours and only ours, with no board approval required." "You're proposing while I'm burning marinara sauce." "I'm proposing because you're burning marinara sauce and laughing about it instead of treating it like a quarterly failure." "I'm proposing because you're happy. Because we're happy. Because I love you, and I want to keep loving you for the next 50 years. She set down the spoon, turned off the burner, and looked at him with those gray eyes that had first caught his attention in a dive bar on Christmas night. "Yes," she said. Absolutely, yes. The wedding was small, held in early September in a garden venue that had nothing to do with corporate prestige and everything to do with actual beauty. Ethan's sister stood as his best person, her boys serving as enthusiastic if chaotic ring bearers. Sarah Chen came, along with a handful of colleagues from Meridian who'd become friends instead of just coworkers. And in the front row, looking uncomfortable but present, sat Vivian's mother. The reconciliation had been slow, painful, and incomplete. 3 months of phone calls that started stiff and gradually thawed into something resembling honesty. Vivian's mother had shown up a week before the wedding, ostensibly to help, but really to assess whether her daughter had truly lost her mind walking away from success. What she found was a different version of Vivian, still brilliant, still driven, but directing that drive toward things that mattered instead of things that impressed. Vivian had started consulting, taking on projects she actually cared about instead of whatever paid the most. Ethan had landed a position at a nonprofit that helped small businesses with financial planning, using his accounting skills for something that felt meaningful. They made less money, worked fewer hours, argued about domestic things like whose turn it was to do laundry, and whether they really needed another bookshelf. It was ordinary and messy, and everything Vivian had convinced herself she didn't need, and she'd never been happier. "You look beautiful," her mother said before the ceremony, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. "Happy. I don't know if I've ever seen you happy before." "I don't know if I've ever been happy before," Vivian admitted. "Not like this." "Was it worth it? Giving up everything you built?" "I didn't give up everything. I gave up a title. What I built, the actual skills, the knowledge, the capability, I still have all of that. I'm just using it differently now." Her mother touched her hand, tentative. "I'm sorry for pushing you so hard toward success that you thought it was the only thing that mattered. You were doing your best. We both were. But I'm choosing differently now." "I can see that. And Ethan, he makes you happy?" "Deliriously." "Then I'm glad, truly." It wasn't complete healing. Wounds that deep took years, not months. But it was a start, and that was enough. The ceremony was brief and honest, stripped of formality. They wrote their own vows, Ethan promising to always be honest even when it was hard, to support her dreams even when they scared him, to love her not in spite of her intensity, but because of it. Vivian promising to choose courage over fear, to build a life instead of just a career, to be present instead of perfect. When the officiant pronounced them married, they kissed while 24 people applauded, and Ethan's nephews made exaggerated gagging noises that made everyone laugh. The reception was in the same garden, casual and warm, no assigned seating, no formal dances, just food and music, and the kind of celebration that happened when people gathered because they wanted to, not because they were obligated. Vivian's mother left early, claiming exhaustion but really just overwhelmed by emotions she'd spent years suppressing. But she hugged Vivian before she left, brief but real, and promised to call next week. "That's progress," Ethan said, watching her go. "It's something," Vivian agreed. "Maybe that's all healing ever is, a series of small somethings that add up to something bigger." As the sun set and the string lights came on and the party continued around them, Ethan pulled Vivian aside to a quiet corner of the garden. "Happy?" he asked. "Overwhelmingly. You?" "Yeah, this is perfect." "It's not perfect. Your nephew spilled punch all over the gift table, and my mother was uncomfortable the entire time, and I'm pretty sure the caterer is charging us for food we didn't order." "Okay, it's perfectly imperfect. How's that?" She laughed and kissed him. "That's accurate." A year after the wedding, on another snowy Christmas night, they walked the same route where everything had begun, past Murphy's Tavern, where they stopped in for a drink and found the same bartender who didn't remember them, past the spot where Vivian had stumbled in her heels and Ethan had caught her elbow, all the way to Lakeshore Drive, where Vivian's old building rose against the skyline like a monument to someone else's life. "Do you miss it?" Ethan asked. "The penthouse, the corner office, being CEO?" Vivian thought about it, really thought about it. "Sometimes I miss the clarity, the clear metrics of success, the certainty of knowing exactly what was expected. But then I come home to our messy apartment and our half-finished projects and you burning dinner, and I remember that clarity isn't the same as fulfillment. That's a very diplomatic way of saying no. I'm saying no with nuance. I earned that right. They stood on the sidewalk while snow fell around them and the city glittered with holiday lights and indifference. A year ago, Vivian had been drunk and desperate and certain that success meant loneliness. Now she was married and building a different kind of life and learning that happiness didn't follow a strategic plan. "What do you want for Christmas?" Ethan asked. "This, right here. Walking through the snow with you, going home to warmth instead of emptiness, waking up tomorrow without an agenda. That's all I want." That's a pretty low bar. It's the bar I should have been reaching for all along. They walked home hand in hand, leaving tracks in fresh snow that would be covered by morning. Behind them, the corporate towers gleamed with the lights of people still working, still climbing, still chasing success that looked impressive from the outside and felt hollow from within. Ahead, their small apartment waited with its clutter and chaos and the promise of something real. Vivian had built an empire and discovered it was lonely at the top. Success hadn't saved her. The corner office hadn't filled the void. But love, messy, complicated, requiring constant effort love, that had given her something worth more than any quarterly earnings report. She'd walked away from power to find partnership. Quit being a CEO to learn how to be human. Traded $17 million of marble for a 2-bedroom apartment where someone knew how she took her coffee and didn't care about her professional achievements. And somehow, in losing everything she thought defined her, Vivian had found the one thing she'd been missing all along: a life that felt full. They reached their building and climbed the stairs to their apartment, shedding snow and scarves and the last remnants of the cold. Inside it was warm and lived in, books everywhere, and dishes in the sink, and evidence of 2 people building a life together one imperfect day at a time. Ethan started hot chocolate while Vivian changed into sweatpants and the oversized sweater she'd stolen from him months ago. They curled up on this couch together, watching snow fall outside the window, and Vivian felt something settle in her chest, a contentment so foreign it took her a moment to recognize it. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For walking me home that first night, for seeing me when I was falling apart and choosing to stay anyway, for showing me that success and happiness don't have to be mutually exclusive. They just require different metrics. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to figure it out alone." "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence while the city settled into night and the snow continued to fall, covering everything in fresh white possibility. Tomorrow they'd wake up and navigate their ordinary, extraordinary life, work and errands, and the small negotiations that came with building something together. But tonight, on Christmas night exactly 1 year after a chance encounter in a dive bar, they had each other and warmth and the quiet certainty that choosing love over loneliness had been the bravest, smartest thing either of them had ever done. Outside, Chicago glittered and churned, indifferent to small human dramas playing out in its towers and apartments. But inside their home, Ethan and Vivian had found what no amount of success could buy: connection, partnership, and the courage to choose each other every single day. The story that began with a drunk CEO crying into whiskey on Christmas night had transformed into something neither of them could have predicted. Not a fairy tale. Those didn't include resignations and family reconciliations and the hard work of actually building a life together. But something real, something lasting, something worth every risk they'd taken and every sacrifice they'd made. Vivian Cross was no longer the ice queen of Michigan Avenue. She was just Vivian, wife, consultant, work in progress, learning to be human after years of being untouchable. And Ethan Hale was no longer just a senior accountant grinding through quarterly reports. He was a partner, husband, fellow traveler on the journey from loneliness to connection. Together, they'd built the one thing neither of them could buy or strategize or earn through performance metrics: a home. Not the $17 million kind with imported marble and floor-to-ceiling windows. The real kind, made of shared meals and honest conversations, and the willingness to choose each other even when it was hard. As midnight approached and Christmas gave way to another ordinary day, Vivian looked at Ethan, really looked at this man who dared her to walk home in the snow and ended up walking beside her through everything that came after, and knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Success hadn't saved her, love hadn't erased her ambition. But together, choosing courage over fear and connection over isolation, they'd built the one thing that mattered most, a life that felt full. And that, Vivian thought as sleep finally claimed her, was worth more than all the corner offices in the world.